Yeah. So now let's kind of veer into, kind of what's going on in our world right now.
Right.
We just buried, George Floyd the other day, who was killed unjustifiably. And so I wanted to understand like some of the challenges. So you are, we mentioned a police officer. You're also a black woman, as anybody watching this can see, and you're also a mother of a black son.
Right.
So what in that poses, so when you talk to your son about dealing with the police, what is the most important advice that you give him, and what is the most important advice that you think that black people need to understand in dealing with the police?
Hmm. I take a deep breath
Right.
because I've taught not only my son, but other people's sons and other people how I feel like they should deal with the police to lessen their chances of anything going bad, right? And to me, with especially with here lately, even within the last 10 years that I've been in law enforcement, somebody can do everything that I've told them to do and still not walk away from that interaction with an officer. And so I think that's the most hurtful part to me is that no matter what we tell our loved ones, or no matter what I've told people that I love and care about, they might still end up on the wrong end of the thing. And it's frustrating. It's
Yeah.
frustrating. You know, my son, I was telling another mom the other day, earlier today, my son is probably 6 foot now, 250 pounds. He's a giant, but he's a baby. He's my giant. So to any scary officer that comes in contact with him, I would hate for them to see this oversized guy as, Mr. George Floyd was, a big dude, and use that as I'm intimidated or I'm scared for my life when that's my 17-year-old baby that wouldn't hurt a fly.
Hmm.
So I'm scared for my son. Every time he leaves the house, I'm scared for him.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, so that that kind of brings to my mind, like I've seen many different incidents of people who it don't seem like they should have ever been on the force, right? Like in the case of Philando Castile there in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, where he got pulled over. Officer asked him if he had a weapon. He said yes, and you know, and then the next second, it's like the officer just panicked, grabbed his gun, and just bam, 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 bam. It just seemed like. So, what do you think that we can do from a recruitment standpoint, a screening standpoint, to make sure that certain people with certain mindsets do not get on the force? So, so just kind of speak to that aspect, because we all know that there are some people who should not be policed. So, what can we do better in that regard to make sure that they don't be in that position?
Well, to those that don't even know the process, let me go through that real quick, right?
Hmm.
So the background check for to be a police officer is very, very strenuous. It's like a 6 month long process. Any department that hires you on quicker than 6 months probably didn't do a good job of checking your background. So they're gonna you fill out this booklet, and it's like the last one I filled out was like 86 pages. No lie. From everything from who your mama is to your grandmother, which school you went to, every address you've ever lived at, who your neighbor is. I mean, questions that you just like, really? And so they do all of that. They check all of that. They talk to all your neighbors. They talk to your ex-husband, ex-boyfriend. They ask all kinds of questions. I've also served on background checks, and I've done background checks for new hires. So I know just how thorough the background is. And then you do a psychological test. That's like 150 questions that you bubble in, and then you sit down on the couch and you talk to the psych. And then he decides if you're mentally capacitated or not to serve. It's a very strenuous background check, but I feel like some people do slip through the cracks, but for the most part, they do catch the bad apples, right? And so let's say that you have all good apples that are hired on, right? And then 5 years into their career, something major happens, whether it's a divorce, they've seen too many things on the street. Because let's be honest, when an officer goes through a traumatic experience, whether it be in his personal life or at work, no one cares. Okay? Sarge don't ask you how are things at home, very rarely, unless he's like your best friend. They don't care. What they want you to do is show up to work, put in that time, do your job effectively, and go home. So nobody cares what you're thinking, how you're feeling, right? So to the officer that gets involved in a shooting or that saw a dead baby or whatever the case may be, there's no follow-up site. There's nobody that we can go talk to. I mean, I take that back. There's nobody that they suggest that we talk to before returning back to duty, okay? And I think all of that is necessary. It's needed. I myself, and I can only speak for myself, have been through many traumatic situations while being involved in law enforcement. And I had to learn to deal with it on my own. Because had I have gone to someone and said, this is how I'm feeling, I would have been looked at as a weakling. And as a woman in this job, I'm already looked at as a weakling, right? And so you just take on everybody else's problems, my own problems at work, my family's problems. I mean, I'm only human, right? And who do I turn to when I need help? Who do I turn to when I need help? So they tell you, the department tells you, oh, we have counseling services if you ever need it. It's free to you. You get like 3 or 4 free services, and then anything after that you have to pay for. But again, who trusts that whatever I say to that person is not going to get back to my chief? And now he's looking at me like, oh, she crazy, or she's on medicine, and now my job is in jeopardy. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I think that a lot of times it's not really through the hiring process. I think it's as we go along in the job, there has to be like some follow-up, like maybe every 5 or 6 years, officers should be like mandatory sites, maybe.
Yeah, that's I thank you for sharing that, because that's not something
Definitely
I ever thought about. So it's just like in the military, PTSD, when they go and they have these traumatic experiences, you can't go and see blown off limbs every day of your life and just go back to society and just be normal. So that's I thank you for bringing that up, because that seems like something that should be mandated, because yes, as police officers deal with a lot of drama on a day-to-day basis. So some sort of process in there, like check and just mental health check, to make sure that people are going with the right mind, would not with the right mind, but they're coping with what they see on a daily basis that they can still manage. So that's a great point. Y'all have other questions? I have some others, but they're on.
Since most police forces are male dominant, it seems like what you're describing is actually the mindset, because I was talking to somebody the other day, and what you're talking about is exactly the parallel of what we were talking about, the plight of the black male. Just basically piling situations on their back day to day, nobody to talk to. When you do talk to somebody feels like, okay, you're weak. Or if you seek counseling, it's like you're weak. But no, I mean, mental health is something that we need to focus on as black men, as of course, now you brought that to my attention, as police, and anybody else that's going through strenuous situations, because basically you lay the groundwork, because you're saying from day one when you walked in, it's stressful, because when you walk in the morning, it's stress. Throughout the day, it's stress. You go home with that, to your house at night, and you're stressed out. And where's that release? Nobody's asking you how your day was, or how you coping with this.
Nobody.
And how can we help? And how can we help? And you know what? I have to commend you, because every time I see you out, you have a big smile on your face. You're always joyful. You know,
It
you're always
depends
having
on
a
who
good
you're
time.
talking.
So major props, definitely.
Thank you.
That's probably her way of coping.
Exactly.
I,
You
no, I think
develop-
she's just happy like that.
Yeah.
All right.
So
you got a question,
it's good that we're having this conversation, right? Because a lot of those things I've never been privy to. The only time I've seen like things that go on in a police department is through Law and Order or some TV show. So it's
Throw it in the trash.
it's sensationalized. You know, they show us the good part and all that good stuff, but we don't understand the grit.